Okay, hello. I'm just checking the sound to make sure how this sounds, but thank you for those who are joining already. Let's see. How are we doing today? You alright? Okay, that sounds good. Ooh. Yeah, it's annoying because there's got even more latency than usual. I will explain that later, but it's weird. Oh, I have multiple versions of myself that I'm seeing because I've got a more complicated setup today, so that's weird to see my face everywhere. But yes, as always, if you have an actual YouTube account, not necessarily a channel, but an account, you can say hi in the chat if you want. You don't have to, but if you want. Alternatively, if you know me personally, then you can send a message by any other means if you want during the course of this. But whatever you want, just the main thing is thank you for coming along, checking this out. Here we go, people watching, cool. And again, as always, a setting up. We're just going to wait a few minutes to give people a chance to arrive. But yeah, last book of the set. Here we have it, next to all of the rest. I mean, you can see here all of the extracts that we are going to be reading today. Because I'm paranoid, I'll check sound once more. Cool. I don't know if it's just... Oh no, it is on multiple screens. I have no idea why there is a tiny black bar at the side of the screen. If I've just pointed that out for you and you hadn't noticed, apologise. But I tried to sort that out yesterday. No idea. No matter what I did, it's just there on the stream. Again, it will be to do with this new setup that I have to talk about in the later on in the schedule rather than right away. But so let's wait until about 5 past, and then we'll get into the proper beginning of things. I would play some sort of intro music, but A, I have nothing commissioned, and B, anything that I would play would then that's not commissioned would get copyright striked. Was that a warning? Yeah, fair enough. Whatever. I'm just looking at the settings from a distance there. Cool. Cool. Here's slightly painted. But yeah, hope you are all having a good Saturday, a good May as best as possible. However, whatever it is that you're getting up to anything of interest at the moment. Okay, you know what, let's just make a start, shall we? So, if you have seen the video that I did on the overview of book 4, then obviously it is going to be a little bit of a repeat here, but because it is the release of Towered Storm, let us just do a bit of an overview of what it is that we have going on here, of course, in a non-spoilery format for, not giving away not only the twists from this, but also from the previous books that I have with me as well. So, in case you need a reminder, or for whatever reason you haven't heard thus far already, this whole thread of this set of 4 books has been that from throughout human history, we have been subtly swayed and guided in certain directions so that eventually Earth and humanity will be set to get to a point that it can be used by otherworldly forces, specifically the Brethren Lords who are existing in an other dimension within the multiverse, who are in themselves a faction within a larger conflict going along within those different dimensions. Our protagonist is one Philip Quint, who is a teenage boy who throughout his life has had these abilities to manipulate reality around him to an extent. Obviously, earlier in life, it wasn't as well. He had the abilities always, but he wasn't aware of them. It's more during these adventures he's become a bit more conscious of what he can do, and he also hasn't questioned any of this fact. It's just because of how he has been set up as part of the whole situation. However, at the end of the latest school year, he starts being approached by these mysterious figures, most of whom are trying to get him to prepare for this position in a grander plan. Meanwhile, there is one who is trying to dissuade him from all of this. And amidst all of the confusion, he and his peers, who we meet along the way, end up going on these different adventures around the world, beyond the world, through time itself as well. And, they're learning about these different alien influences that have been had on the Earth. And, well, with Philip ultimately having to decide if he is going to go along with the role that the Brethren Lords have set out for him, or rather if he's going to try to break away from that, if that's even really an option. So that more so is the setup for book one. Wow, that book feels thin compared to Tower of the Storm. Let's just compare those a bit. Yeah, that's more setup for this, and that carries over through the different books. By the time we get to this one, we are now in the situation where that time that the Brethren Lords have been working towards is now upon us. The time for making decisions is up, and yet our main characters aren't really in an ideal situation. So these wheels and mechanisms that have been in motion for however long are now coming into effect. And, well, the people are scattered. Are they able to come together, or are they just going to have to try to do their best from where they respectively are? Meanwhile, because this is a situation, a threat that is impacting the entire world, we're also getting more points of view introduced in this book, just as how in the previous books we've started to build up the idea of switching away to other perspectives briefly to get other angles on things. And so we get some point of views from people in America, people in Russia, people in Spain. I think those are the main international ones. We're going to have a couple of others as well. That is weird how the different screens are at different latencies. Anyway, yes, we've got that. We're going to get more situations, more threads that are going to tie in. However, this isn't to say that without the expected group standing up against them, that the Brethren Lords are about to have an easy time of this. I mean, say they've been preparing for this for thousands of our years. Yeah, they deserve to get the win under it. Well, but nevertheless, a different opposition now comes to face them in the form of another faction from the larger multiversal conflict, and because they're aware that the Brethren Lords are about to make their move, and thus far the whole conflict has been in a bit more of a Cold War-y state where people definitely have tensions against each other, but no one's actively taking the fight just yet. They're waiting for the others to make the first move. But now that it's clear that the Brethren Lords are about to make their first move, this other faction now can sweep in, though they're going to do theirs first. And it's decided they will do theirs on Earth as well as an extra kick in the teeth to the Brethren Lords. So we've currently got two potential Armageddons taking place on this day in this book in the summer of 2016. And we'll have to see how they do that. How can humanity face off one, let alone two of these threats? I need to make sure that my screen does not go dark during this because I have a schedule on here and I don't want to have to keep unlocking my phone. It's difficult to say a bit more about about the book because of spoilers, as I say, and more so than just with the previous books. Because, again, this is stuff that I said in the book overview video, whereas books 1, obviously you got the whole thread going through it, but whereas books 1 and 2 are slightly more isolated within each other, they're their own separate stories, and indeed the story of Tower of the Storm is different to Celestial Coup, those books 3 and 4 lead they're tied a lot closer together, and in the video I compared it to the Avengers movie. Technically, like, Avengers Assemble, Age of Ultron, Infinity War, Endgame, they're all separate stories. However, compared to Assembled and Age of Ultron, Infinity War and Endgame are a lot more closely connected. They're two consecutive stories. Why can I? Well, because I'm focusing on talking to you that I can't find what I'm supposed to be looking for on my settings here. Where is screen? I don't know. Cool. but because of that, I can talk even less about the plot of this book and what the characters are specifically doing, where they are, what their relationships are with one another, because this is coming right off the tail end of everything that happened in book 3. So if I was to say these characters with this character, or they're doing this, that could give away some of what happens in those specific events as well. So that's limiting me slightly. In line with that, when I was picking out the extracts I was going to read during this live stream, originally there were a couple that I was going to go for because there were moments I wanted to do from the book, and I was rationalising is I will just try to censor them as I'm reading. Like when we did the live stream for book 3, I censored the last extract, I think, that I read out. I replaced certain words and I acknowledged that I was doing this. Here, though, would have been just too complicated to try to change the language on the fly, and also relies on you remembering to do that. So I've switched out what extracts we're going to do. So they're not ideally the ones I would have given away, but they're the ones that are, while still giving you a sense of what's happening in the book in these different sections, and I will give context as always. But yeah, someone trying to email me. Who's trying to email me? This happens every single time. I keep forgetting. YouTube always feels like emailing you to confirm that you've gone live. I'd like to think that we know we've gone live, but okay. Cool. So yes. And the other thing I was just going to say within the context of that is, I don't know how well this shows up, but just noticing where the different extracts are coming from. I've got one, the first one I'm going to do is up here, but then a healthy 6-7 chapters between there and then before we get to this stuff here. And again, originally I was going to do bits from further near the end, but I've decided ultimately that, yeah, we're going to stay away from that. I will just indicate, though, because as has ended up being the case in all of the books thus far, not intentionally, but just how it ends up happening, is that the chapters near the end of the book typically end up being the longest ones. You'll usually end up with a long chapter earlier on, kind of in the first third, and then the end ones being the longest ones. Just, again, not by design, that's just how it ends up being written. But of this book, this here is the final 2 chapters. They're like 30-something pages each compared to the first chapter, which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages for the first chapter. So we're again, because there's more story to tell, and if I was to break up that final chapter further, there's no natural breaking point. It wouldn't make sense to do so. But we've got a lot of things to wrap up, hopefully, though not in a case where people start commenting on it like the end of Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, but which personally I've never seen as a problem. The number of endings, people have commented on how many endings that has. So we've got a couple of endings here for all the different stuff that's going on, and some stuff that's setting up further things that will happen later on in the franchise. But hopefully it's not dragging on a bit. The majority of what I just indicated to you is still your actual climax, rather than denouement. But with this, we might as well get along with our first extract. So we have that thing here. So you know what? Well, the only context I'm going to give to this is that we are currently in the middle of nowhere. And I mean, as the text kind of describes, but I'm cutting off a bit of the earlier context again to keep it a little bit secret. But it's a way station, so between different cities, essentially. For one particular way station, events were about to take a turn for the unexpected. It was a relatively small structure, little more than a shelter made of leftover materials from the local city conversion. There were the basic facilities needed to house the staff and passers-by, accommodation, storage, a crude cafeteria, but that was about it. On this given evening, the company of Bracknar workers, Bracknars being the artificial slaves of the Brethren Lords, were sat about a fire they had lit in the open space at the centre of the way station, exposed to the perpetually dark sky through the gaps in the roof and through the alleys to their sides, leading straight into the outside world. They weren't cooking anything over the flames. They couldn't exactly eat whilst in these protective suits they had to wear when not indoors, encasing the squat bodies of the Brethren Lord's artificial slaves. There you go, didn't need to give context. They simply sat, staring. It'll be out soon, Tanarkin sighed, eyeing the dwindling embers. Do you want me to add more kindling, or is it time to go back inside? We might as well stay out here. There's not much else to do, was Kajuku's response, this defeatist tone generic for her person. Of course. Actually, when will we get a new intake? Katilv leaned back against the wall, releasing the splint he'd been playing with into the fire with an exhalation that trumped all the others' expressions of tiredness. It wasn't as if the schedule was hard to remember. They'll be passing through in a couple of days for the... Okay, so that hesitation is actually in the book, but I don't know if you can hear that, but it sounds like a motorbike backfiring or something outside. Who's that? Noting Katil's shift in attention, the other Bracknars followed his line of sight out through the alleyway opposite. Visible some distance away in the middle of the lifeless plain was a lone figure, apparently walking in their direction. It was as if this was an official pass-through, they would have had some sort of transport. If instead it was one of those fabled humans of the wilderness, they would need to be utterly foolish to head straight for them. At least something appeared to be happening which required them to use their brains. Clambering to his feet so as to seize the chance to actually do something before his fellows could, not that they were exactly jumping at the opportunity, Katilv grumbled, "I'll go check it out." The others watched him go, switching their lines of sight between his back and the mysterious figure for as long as they could before Katilv turned a corner into the parking bay. Waiting in the bay for him was the way station's one vehicle, a Gale Rider. With a slim metal body, the craft was designed to pull into its prow massive bolts of air to be superheated within the chassis' cavities before being compressed into an air cushion beneath, housed within a rigid skirt so that the increase in pressure could keep the rider off the ground. Of course, some of the air would escape, but at the rate at which more air was being pulled in, made this less of an issue. Once the cushion was at optimum capacity, any excess air would be funneled through the rear of the craft, greatly adding to what propulsion was provided by the rider moving into the craft. Into the momentary vacuums formed in front of it. It was far from the best design to come out of the factories, but why would the Bracknars be gifted with anything other than experimental prototypes? It was all they had, so it was this that Katilv clambered atop. Perching on a seat that was meant for figures bigger than he, the Bracknar started the engine. So, fun fact, that was a design for a vehicle that I made up without giving any sort of thought to if that would even work, so that's why I've added in there the bit of a it's not the best design after the fact. With the Gale Rider building speed, the mysterious figure soon found himself faced with the front end of said vehicle barreling towards him across the dusty plain. After a moment's thought, he decided to stop in his tracks, allowing the craft to approach him on its own. Aside from his very being there, and the hand caressing the end of a scabbard at his waist, there was nothing to be suspicious of about this stranger, at least from what the Bracknar was about to see. Katilv came to a stop about a metre away, trying to appear imposing upon his mettled steed, but the stranger just continued to look at him in a very nonplussed manner, although it was difficult to tell what with the helmet obscuring his face. Of course this person was wearing a protective suit. How else would he have lasted so long out here? But it made it hard to read him all the same. Katilv could guess that this person was relatively young from his height and stature, but other than that there was little else to go on. He was out here to do a job, so he should probably do more than stare. He should probably say something. He should probably speak in English. All those from the outer region who had become stationed around this part of the planet had been taught to speak it, just as a few others had before. Apparently it had been easier than convincing a number of the natives to become multilingual in a new way instead. "What are you doing here?" The figure gestured towards the horizon. "I've business in the city, but I fear the journey is too much for one night. I was hoping I could seek refuge at your way station." "And what business would that be? With all due respect, who are you to know?" Katilv considered the stranger. His suit was certainly officious enough to warrant a higher security clearance, and the only ones braving the journey between the settlements would surely be those with proper cause to do so. "What's your name?" "Patrick Heller, at your service." The figure bowed ever so slightly. "Well, Mr. Heller, I'm sure we can find something for you." Would you like to follow me? Catilv swung the Gale Rider around, encircling Patrick before shepherding him in the direction of the way station. Patrick graciously fell into step alongside the craft, which was returning at a much slower speed than with which it had left. No further words were spoken between the pair until they reached their destination, nor did they look at one another. Each was in their own little world, aware of but not really caring about the other's presence. Tanaka and Kajuku made no attempt to be welcoming as the newcomer approached. They weren't exactly the sort to be open around any visitor that might come their way, but today the pair were even less inclined to be hospitable. They simply continued to gaze into the fire, only slightly turning their backs to the stranger as a subconscious sign of disapproval. Their indignation did nothing to change events, though. In the following minute, they couldn't help but hear their comrade touch down with his company. An internal sigh was shared between the seated Bragnars. "He is human, seeking passage to the city," Catilv explained unprompted. The only sounds that followed were their footsteps and the crackling of the flames. "His name's Patrick Heller," the Bracknar continued. "Says who?" Tanarkin croaked at last, the first of the fire-gazers to break their silence. Catilv glanced between those around him and with appropriate confusion. Before Catilv could miss Tanarkin's tone and state the obvious answer, Patrick stepped forward, retrieving an ID holder from his suit's breast pocket. Flipping it open, he presented it at a comfortable distance to the questioning alien. "There you go, Captain Heller, at your service." Tanarkin snorted. "I don't doubt you have the identification. What I'm saying is, while you have that helmet on, we have no way of knowing that that's you." "Well, I'm sorry, I can't really take it off out here." "That's enough," Catilv stepped in again, preparing to calm his comrades if necessary. "This man is our guest. He just needs shelter for tonight. If you want to be obstinate, fine. But let us at least sit without tearing each other's heads off." You have to do what I probably should have done just before and double check that the audio is still good. Yep, that sounds good. Cool. Right. So yeah, cutting off a little bit before our action, well, not as much action, but discourse more with those seated around the fire. But again, we're going to keep a little bit of the context it's a bit secret in regards to the wider situation that they're currently interacting in. If you want to find out, you want to read the books themselves. I say this, oh, I've said this before. I recognise that at the rate at which these have come out, I doubt anyone bar my actual beta readers have actually read all of these at this point, but because they are all out now, it means if you are enjoying them, then you can go straight on to the next one. I know at least one person has told me they're going to read them all in one go, so hopefully we can enjoy that. But when you get to there, you'll find out what the wider situation was. So, I mentioned in the opening, for those who saw that I have a slightly different setup at the moment, which this is the most complicated that I've had it thus far. I'm having to make use of other family members' laptops as well to look at everything. Previously, last year, so with live streams of books 1 and 2, I swear I could have just schedule a live stream and go live on the laptop itself. On the live stream for book 3, I had to abort the first one and restart because the system just wasn't wanting to work. And I assumed at the time this was because on that day, well, for that week, we had bad internet. We needed to get a new router. It wasn't going to be done in time. However, now that I've had set up this one again, I recognise the same potential issue, but now was able to fix it beforehand. And it seems that if I was just to click go live, I could do that straight through the laptop. It would allow me to do that. But if I want to schedule, which I have done to allow you to see the link for a few days beforehand, I need actual streaming software, such as what I've now got, Streamlabs OBS. And I went with that one because that's what I've heard other YouTubers who are actually successful using. That's what they've got. But first of all, OBS is not intuitive to use. I had to watch a number of tutorials to work out what to do, separate things for it, how to then run it through, add the cameras, microphones. Then when I ended up doing 4 test streams yesterday, and it seems that while running the streaming software, the fan on my laptop likes to go haywire, and that is very audible if we just go through the regular webcam. So what I've had to do is, because I've put on some noise suppression, which might be when I stop talking, it may go dead silent. That's just by how the microphone is setting up its gates. But even then, when I started talking, it allowed you to hear the fan again. So what I've had to do is, rather than using the inbuilt webcam on my laptop, is get a different, plug-in webcam with a long cable, set that up on a different stand in front of me, as far away from the laptop as possible. So that's why if you see me looking over here, that's me looking at the laptop that's running the streaming software at a distance so that you can't hear the fan going. Well, hopefully, I don't think I could hear it when I listen to that. And I've got another one here, which I always have for checking the audio sound periodically. So that's fun. Yeah, basically that's what I was going to say. It's odd, but hey ho, we now have this. I guess it works. Cool. Right. I was going to have a segue to talking about this next bit. I don't remember what it was. Oh well. The other thing that I had to talk about in this section was that, as some of you may have seen, if you follow me on Instagram, the Ragnarök Chronicles, oh yeah, the links aren't actually in this one description, I didn't paste them over. Oh well, they're in all the other descriptions of videos. Is that Gifts of the Mansin has been getting a few reviews, all of which are good. I don't know, as I have mentioned someone, I have a little bit of suspicion about this sort of thing, was quite possibly these accounts big up the reviews because they, I don't know, because rather than just being like a review on Amazon, reminder, if you do read any of the books, please do consider leaving an honest review on Amazon. Rather than leaving it on Amazon, because there are Instagram accounts that review books, and they're trying to maintain an audience, they might want to sensationalize them a bit more, but, it's been good to be getting the positive feedback. I think it was during the second book's live stream, I read a couple of the reviews, and it was kind of like pros and cons and so forth. But with this one, I haven't really had many drawbacks, comments on it being a slightly different thing, and that's what I want to pick out. But generally, good. So where was it? Where was it? I had the foresight to get the extracts of the reviews up on my phone, but I'm now where the extracts were these points. Basically, the gist is the commentary on the fact that my writing style is different, and I have different ways of going about describing certain things and adding detail. Yeah, I am in no way in this way saying that my writing style is brilliant and unique and so forth. But this is a little bit into the fact that, I think, well, most recently, although it's a couple of years ago now, at university, I would have, or indeed, potentially some of my older beta readers from further years ago had commentary about the way I was going about writing, so I should do it this way or this way, and the fact that I just obstinately stayed doing my own stuff because this is how I think, this is how stories work in my head. And I don't know, it's nice to see that acknowledged as part of the thing. It's if you are reading a lot potentially, I don't know, but it's, as well as the different storyline, different writing style potentially, it's worth a fresh air. I don't know, you're the readers, you can tell me. Yeah, what's also interesting is not all of them, but some of the reviews mention the fact that this sort of genre isn't their usual one, yet they enjoyed it anyway. So again, that's good, but it's odd that they review this book, or they went into this book, seeing as it's not their usual ones, but hey ho. It's also interesting that, and not just from the newer reviews that have happened in the last week or so, but back from the original ones as well, that people describe this as fantasy. And I mean, it does have a little Grim Reaper on the front of the books. I get that, fantastic elements, but the fact it's explicitly science fiction. I mean, I know you can merge the two together. Like, you'd argue that Star Wars is a sci-fi fairy tale, was fantastic, as well as a western and so forth. And I remember at university, like, one of the seminars that we had was, or part of it was a discussion of just debating where is the line between sci-fi and fantasy. But I don't know, it's interesting to see how people define their genres, or the genres that they're reading. Just while those then are good interactions that have been had on Instagram, I have also, around this, well, during this last month, started getting a lot more review accounts, not reviewing the book, but asking for, like, commissions to review the book. And I get that, like, it's a service that you can provide, and, you know, I can understand, you know, if you've got people who are posting about books, especially indie authors who need the publicity, maybe reaching out to them, say, hey, do you want to help? You get varying types of requests. You know, some will just, like, they'll give you a breakdown of the services that they do, and they give you a bit of information about yourselves. Others will literally just be one line of, do you want your book reviewed? Some will literally go through your timeline and like over 30 of your posts to get your attention. So you got variety in there, but the main thing is, I now have over 50 DM requests, and I get more, if not every day, every other day. And it's not like, again, maybe you got, and I have looked at some of them, and some of them do look like, yeah, I could consider commissioning a review from you. I'm not really in a position at the moment to want to be paying for those, because at this point, the only income I have is from these books, and that is not much or regular. I'll talk about that more later. But, yeah, even if I was to go with some of them, if I was to try to consider them all, like, how many hundreds of pounds I would be out of pocket by doing that? Because, again, I think the cheapest I've seen was £25, and another went up to 70 for, like, there's a couple of other perks in there as well, but basically the same thing. So, yeah, but, like, I don't want to shut off comments on my posts, because I like it when you guys actually interact with them, to basically stop the, hey, would you kindly look at your DMs once? But it's not the repetitive attention to the account that I'm really looking for. But hey ho, it's something, right? If people are aware that I exist, at least, even if it's a little bit spam. Oh well. Cool. With that, let's probably get on to the next extract, skipping forward, as I said, a bit in the book, just as a reminder while I take a sip. If ever you have YouTube accounts and you want to say something, you can check in chat if you want, got any questions, comments, whatever, it's up to you. Alright. So, let's jump all the way ahead to page 149. Ahead from page 1. No, not page 1, page 7? Page 10. Whatever chapter 1 starts, and actually got a prologue as well. Anyway. You know what? I'm not going to give context for this one. Let's just see how it goes. As of the time of the broadcast, the Oval Office was unusually packed with members of staff hired to assist in public relations, the only stranger aspect of the room being the ornate sword lying on the president's desk for him to examine up close. Most of the individuals were simple PR aides, standing around the edges of the room in readiness for assignments. Meanwhile, at the centre, next to President March, was patiently timekeeping Press Secretary Erin Keane, alongside her assistant Lee Stanheight. For as long as they could only wait for new information to arrive, the room was still and silent. For so much so that they could hear the occasional footsteps passing in the adjacent corridors with near crystal clarity. Acting against this, in the final moments, March began tapping his own foot with bubbling expectancy. They should have had an opportunity to see it, Erin concluded, lowering her watch. How are we doing? Not lifting their eyes from their phone, Lee replied, approximately 39% agree with you, 41% think you should be impeached, and 20% think this is all an elaborate publicity stunt. How What? Oh yeah, and as always, disclaimer: all of these characters are American. I'm not doing an accent because I can't. As in all the characters in this scene. March snapped. Those few statistics having transformed his anticipatory mood into one where he really wanted to punch something. What exactly are they saying? I'm not sure you want to know that, sir. Some of them, though, are along the lines that you're out there to. Along the lines of you going out there to deal with this yourself, seeing as you're the one to bring the aliens here. Their words, not mine. March turned to Erin in dismay. This is just people complaining online. That won't be everyone's views. Erin made a non-committal noise. Technically, that's true, and people are more likely to voice that they have a negative opinion than when it's a positive one. But unless you're suggesting we happen to find every single non-supporter already, all right, I get the picture. I think we can say we've got every single one who thought you were a lizard in a skin suit, Lee offered as a consolation. Lizard in a what? No, this wasn't something he was getting into. President March separated himself from the conversation, even though he'd been an integral part of it, moving over to the window where a cluster of PR aides parted for him. From here he could see the grounds lit by the morning sun. You couldn't tell by looking at this view that anything was different about the world. Nature was so unknowing of the events that took place upon it. Sighing internally, March swore to himself that if anyone said anything about other countries doing without this level of media coverage, he would not hold back at all. Not only were they one of the closest countries to the Lord's sight, putting them in a position of being a bigger threat to the operation should they lose control, but if these other countries had to go through with their orders, if he had to resort to doing the same, no one would like the fallout. Everyone hates losing what's familiar to them. From behind him, Lee called out with innocent curiosity. Mr. President, have you really been in negotiation with the aliens before now? March's thoughts grinded to a halt. Did this person actually not know? How could someone in their position not have been given a proper briefing? Looking straight past Lee, March asked of Erin, where did you find them? With all due respect, I don't think that's the most important issue at the moment, sir. Then tell me what is important. How can we get my popularity up again? I'm sorry, sir. Eve shook her head. I think a big part of it is that people have seen too many movies. Hollywood's told them this won't end well. Damn it! March cursed, with some containment of his vehemence. Striding back over. Jeer, how do we improve public opinions? March's vice president, Jeer Abernathy, was a well-built man with a contrastingly mousy face. Throughout this meeting, he had been sat upon one of the settees, positioned in the middle of the crowded space, ignoring the members of staff behind him and quite frankly doing the same to the discourse in front. Abernathy had, in the time he hadn't been directly involved in the proceedings, become lost in his mind's moderate stream of consciousness, meaning that when March addressed him, there was a visible flicker of shock as his brain caught up with the situation. His line of sight not entirely fixed on March, so as to also gauge the two's response to his words in turn, Abernathy eventually managed to suggest, Me? Oh, well, I couldn't. I wouldn't have thought there's one particular. I suppose maybe because the words are solely coming from you? They might receive them better if supported by people they have more of a connection to? No offence. March gave a nod of satisfaction at these words. Now, there's a constructive idea. But everyone who knows about this is in the government, or at least something similar. They're not going to get a better reception than me, surely. We haven't used the recordings we got for the election campaign yet, Mr. President. The reminder had come from a woman standing amidst all the other PR aides waiting for instructions. While she subsequently gave the impression that she regretted, in part, drawing attention to herself, she nevertheless retained her upright and formal composure, not seeking refuge amongst her peers for having voiced her proposal. Erin stepped in an attempt to clarify this unexpected interjection. This is Clara Chatelaine. She's the one whose plan you're going to run with. Go. Bit more politics in there as well. All that stuff I have mentioned when talking about book 3. But yes, we are starting to see a little more of the political side of affairs of the influencing of humanity. Not to say by any means that in this version of the universe all politicians are aware of the actions of the Weather Lords or whoever, but certainly some are, and that is behind some choices that are made. Anyway, which may or may not have veiled references to real things. Anyway, there we go with that. Our second, once the action of the book has really started to get underway, which over, what was it, 149 pages in, the action had better started. Cool. Oh, actually, that's a helpful, unexpected segue, talking about the page number. Yeah, so this is clearly, as I've shown, the longest of the books that I have had. I've written, longest of anything I've written at this point. So yeah, it's come out at what was it, 390 something. I forget the actual page number, and I can't check that one because the format has very slightly changed since I got the author copy. It's 390 pages, something like that, not including front and back matter. So yeah, and this meant that years back, when I was initially writing it, there came to a point at some point where Spellcheck just decided no, it's not going to look at anything anymore. So when writing and then the subsequent drafts coming down to the last proofread / editing that I've done since the start of April, I have had nothing to double check for me about spelling or grammar or stuff like that. Yeah, it's one of those things where if you know what the sentence is probably going to say, in your reading, even if you're trying to read closely, you may not pick up necessarily on like two letters being the wrong way around or something. It's like how, so long as the first and last letters are in the right place, you can still read a word with the letters jumbled, in theory. So what that meant was that, well, actually, further back context, because when you upload your paperback and ebook versions, you do that separately. So when uploading your paperback version, you do it via a Word document or PDF. I just do it as a Word document. Meanwhile, if you're doing the ebook version, I think you can still upload it as paperback, but in order to set it up where the contents menu knows which pages to click to and so forth, there's a separate Kindle preparation app that you can download and run it through and sort out all of that stuff. Because of, I don't see why it couldn't do it with a Word document, but because it's Kindle software that formats the ebook, when you then upload it to Kindle Direct Publishing, it can spell check the ebook version, can't spell check the paperback. And up until this point, because books 1, 2, and 3 I have had a functioning spell check on my Word document, there hasn't been an issue with this. It goes through, and on the ebook version, there's no spelling errors. Well, it may pick up sometimes on alien words. Strangely, it doesn't pick up on the majority of alien words. Maybe it's because they're used so often and consistently, it recognises it's probably a word in here, but sometimes it'll pick up on an odd thing. Oh, did you mean something else? Anyway, there have been never any issues there. So when it came to uploading book 4, I just upload the paperback version. Cool. Once I've done that, next move on to the ebook version. At which point it came back with me for spelling errors. Thankfully, there were only 12. Of the whole book, there were only 12 spelling errors, which honestly, without spell check, great. I mean, I've corrected some stuff in the edit anyway, but anyway. So for a period of like 36 hours, because once you've uploaded a book, you have to wait for it to finish processing, and then it goes live on Amazon before you can then edit it. You can then edit it as much as you want. You can edit the contents of the manuscript. You can't edit and the price and so forth. You can't edit the style of paper because you've got white paper or cream paper. You can't change if it's color or black and white, any of like that stuff. But the contents, price, blurb, you can change all that. So waited about. There was 16 hours. About 16 hours that it took to upload the paperback, the typo filled, well, not filled, but the copy that had typos in it. 16 hours where that took to upload. As soon as it became live and I could edit it again, I had in the manuscript made the corrections. I'd already done that in the interim. As soon as it went live, I went in and edited that stuff. That then took another 20 hours to go up. So there was overall a period of about 36 hours where, well, no, because it wasn't live in the first 16. So about 20 hours where, in theory, you could have bought a faulty version. But that's fixed now. And anyway, that's why I always make sure to get the books up slightly early beforehand into the system so that there's no delays on release and so forth. So basically, it's all fixed now. Nothing left. But the ebook I fixed straight away because it checks your spelling before you click the upload. So I just went back and changed it, and the ebook's always been fine. I mean, I don't know if it's really noteworthy, but potentially. A little while ago, the KDP, the Kindle Direct Publishing, updated so that you can now buy my books in Australia. Well, any book, but my books in Australia, if you want as well. So I had to set a price for that. Still, the prices are pretty much as low as they can be. I am I've talked about this before. You've got they take away the printing cost, and then Amazon takes a percentage based on what you set, what you want your. Well, hold on. You can set it with ebooks. Whatever. They take a certain percentage of royalties from it. So there is a minimum threshold to make sure that at the very least they cover the printing cost and that Amazon gets an amount that they want. So with the books being bigger, that means a higher printing cost. That means the price goes up. So that's where they have got progressively a bit more expensive. So I think it's book one is $7.77, which I coincidentally that's just what it was, and coincidentally I like it because it's nice. And then I think this one again, this is in British pounds, convert to your own currency. Meanwhile, in Towered Storm is $11.87, I think. So it's £4.10 more, but it's over twice the length of the first book, or around twice the length, something like that. So you get more. Yeah, it's more. I was just mentioning. Yeah, so. I basically said it's not the absolute lowest threshold that it could be, because if it was at the absolute lowest threshold, I would get no royalties. Because Amazon allows you to do that, because why do they care? So long as you have the printing cost on their money, they're happy for it to go as low as that. Well, I should specify, in the primary market, no, that's not possible. You always get a certain amount in the primary. So because I set up the primary Amazon as .co.uk, I think with book 4, I get £2.38, I think, is my inherent royalties. But once you start going into other currencies, so if you were to buy it in Europe with the euros, or Australia, or Canada, I think the US I still get a bit more. I think I get $1. But with all those other ones, yeah, I've to just get it as low as possible, because I don't want to steal too much from you. You know, I want you to make you more inclined. Well, yeah, business standpoint, I want you more inclined to read the book. And it's more important to get more readers than to get more money at this point. Yeah, I think I get a penny from those. That's how I've set it up. So it's just like a tiny fraction above what the minimum threshold could be. Anyway, what I meant to go on to say was that, because that was a completely unintended tangent, on the note of you being able to update manuscripts after the fact, I wasn't originally going to talk about this, but sure, why not? It doesn't really matter. If you haven't got round to buying any of the books yet, which is perfectly fine, that's also potentially a good position, because what you now have are the doubly polished versions. There's basically no difference since the original release, but there were a couple of things I noticed, like I might have sometimes, like a couple of cases, mixed up affect versus effect. I'm aware that once in book 2, in the original upload, for bated breath, I spelt it B-A-I-T-E-D, not B-A-T-E-D as it's meant to be. Or when should you capitalise the word sun, or when shouldn't you? So that's a general rule. So if you don't know, at least from what I understand from repeatedly checking on this, if what you're writing about is either in space, or you mention another spatial body in the same sentence, you capitalise sun. if it's on Earth and you don't mention another celestial body, it's lowercase, regardless. But there's the tiniest little like details like that that have been tweaked. So nothing about the story itself has changed. So it means if you bought the books when they first came out, I mean, thank you, but you get the special editions where there may be the tiniest little imperfections here and there. Whereas if you buy them now, those should have been ironed out as well, because I'm doing this all on my own, and while I've mentioned having beta readers, that was still a few years ago. All of the latest drafts and final stuff has been done just by myself, because I decided to get these out every 3 months. I don't have time to wait for beta readers to turn around stuff as well. I mean, certain things, regardless, I wasn't going to get a spell check for, and that is the foreign languages that sometimes crop up in the books. This basically only applies to, well, no, it does only apply to Book 1, Gift of the Mansin, and in a larger case, Book 4, Tower of the Storm. So in all, whenever characters aren't speaking, well, they're speaking a real non-English language, like alien languages will just, the dialogue's in English and we acknowledge that it's whatever language they're speaking. But if it's like French or Spanish or whatever it is, you know, I want to be authentic to that. So yeah, that dialogue, and just within the dialogue, nothing else, is in that language. And either way, I always made sure when I was writing it that the stuff that's in the foreign languages is never pivotal information. Or if it is important, the surrounding either responses in English or the narration, the prose, makes it clear what the important information was. So you're not missing anything, per se. But nevertheless, you know, we have that. Thing is, while I may have studied Spanish to GCSE and French a little bit before that, German a little bit before that, I do not speak those languages in any maybe if I saw a little bit of Spanish, I could have a go at translating it, but definitely not English into other language. So in all of those cases, I have gone to other friends or people that I can get in contact with who do speak those languages to help me with those. Of course, I'm not going to say names in case that counts as doxing or anything, but I appreciate everyone who's helped me on that front. So yeah, with that, you may get a couple passages, which I've also made sure I definitely wasn't reading as this extract, because, for instance, I'm not going to have a go at the section where we have Russians exchanging a few lines, because I wouldn't have a clue where to start with even doing that phonetically. I could have a go at doing because there's one line of Greek. I could have a go at Greek phonetically, but again, I probably wouldn't get the proper pronunciation correct. Yeah, just with that was another thing where for the couple of years, few years now, that I have had the manuscript for this book for just kind of on my computer and done, like it was a matter of, do I transliterate it into the Roman alphabet to make it any slightly easier for readers? But on this last read, so I thought, no, that probably would make it even hard to try to translate, because at this point, if you know someone who speaks any language, you can check them out. Otherwise, if it's like the French or the Spanish, because that's still the Roman alphabet, you can probably plug that into a translator anyway. With the Greek and this is all applying to the Greek and the Russian, last point. There will be translators where you can add in a keyboard sort of thing. But yeah, no, I have ultimately decided I will go with the authentic characters, because otherwise also I don't know if that would come across as disrespectful. Is that the word I want to go for? I don't know. Either way, multiple languages, because it's all around the world and people don't all speak English. I have been asked when I first promoted a couple of weeks ago the release of Book 4. I was asked if I had any intentions of turning these into audiobooks. And I have also talked about previously in an Instagram post, considering would people be interested in that. And the main thing at the moment is I couldn't do it myself because I have no recording equipment to properly do it. Like you can tell, this is not crystal clear recording stuff. Nor can I do voices, as I've established. Can't do the American accents or the French accents, or even within English, I can't do a feminine voice or differentiate between male voices or different ages, whatever, not in any convincing way. Nor can I do the languages. But what that does mean is if I was to ever do an audiobook and like hire a voice actor or someone to narrate it, not only would I have to teach them the pronunciations of the alien words that I've made up, they're also going to have to be able to speak all these foreign languages. Alternatively, we do it more like a radio play, and you have a narrator but then separate voice actors. But there are 101 named characters in book 4. Not all of them have lines. Some of them are just names that like called back to from previous stories or something like that. But the majority of them have lines. So that would be a big cast. So I guess you have fewer actors that can then do multiple voices. But I can understand the appeal of doing an audiobook. Growing up, I consumed more audiobooks than actually reading them. But not something that's going to be on the table soon. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, everything all seems to be going all right. Okay, so yeah, let's head up to extract 3. So, if you have seen certain videos that I've talked about this species, or maybe I mentioned them in the book 2 live stream, I don't remember, the Asnemoys being one of the species. So they show up again in this book. To give a brief description, you have 2 types, the predators and the disciples, with slightly different anatomies. Largely, you have your main torso with 2 arms coming off at each with 5 digits again. However, from the legs, instead of coming off at the waist, they're more coming up and then down like grasshopper legs from near where our shoulder blades would be. These are hooved. I've got your head. In the disciple state, you've got this kind of rounded off small teeth, eyes on the side of the head, so a paler shell. Whereas for the predator Asnemoys, you've got fangs, sharp teeth. Eyes instead are in front. You've got horns poking out horns poking out from there. You have claws that aren't just coming out from here, but rather actually split all the way up the finger. And you've got spines coming out of the legs as well. So different is it? Oh, and darker, like more carmine shells. So that's just to give you a bit of context for visualizing them, at least, which I couldn't do in the video where I broke them down because I have no graphic designers or anything for drawing, and this is all fictional. Just context. The disciple state Asnemoy Orenfar could only feel satisfied as it left the consultation. They'd barely needed to even have one. There could be no doubt that the idol was ready for firing as early as could be, that they would have their deity's blessing, or that the advancing Planthias, the Planthias being a different, more like judicial, like law enforcement race, they impose their justice on other species, advancing Planthias would have no chance of impeding their progress. Within the protective shell of their creation, there was nothing but their progress. There was nothing but the prime conditions for making their joyous day. In high yet composed spirits, Onfar jogged over to the nearest column by which the crew could move between decks. This was an easy thing to spot, with the idol's layout being no different from other Asnemoy architecture, wide open floors with the rooms being self-contained within isolated cubes. On being close enough, Onfar removed a grip from its arm to slip around its palm instead. This grip allowed the Asnemoy, once grabbing onto the column with that same hand, to slide down its length with ease, sliding over the handholds as fast as gravity would allow. Deck after deck flew past Onfar's eyes, although it was able to keep account of them all the same, which was good for when it wanted to get off. Launching itself away from the column to land a little way away, Onfar waited a few seconds for its head to settle before identifying the direction in which it had to go. There were no other Asnemoys prowling the deck who might have indicated a bearing to follow, for their limited crew should all have been at their stations, but being the high-ranking officer it was, Orfar knew the arrangements of every cube in relation to the others, even if they were identical in all but size. Concluding that the nursery was to its right, Orfar strode off, the clopping of its hooves echoing off the cold mineral floor. A slightly smaller cube than those ahead of it along its route, the nursery peeked into view as the Asdormoy rounded its predecessor's corner, its entrance presenting itself for use, the faint sound of mild splashing audible from the other side. The nursery inside largely consisted of rocky mounds built into the floor with water creating pools within the dips and cracks. There were definite pathways traversing the room, where the various types of stone had been clumped together in long strips, culminating in a moderately raised platform made of one flat rock. But mostly this was a near-accurate representation of the natural habitat their young would have initially grown up in back on their homeworld. Even the lights simulated the day and night patterns their ancestors would have been accustomed to. Inhabiting the rocks and pools, then, were the selected younglings whose parents had decided to bring them along for the journey. Little more than newborns, these minuscule zoea were covered in a viscous layer that would eventually harden into their first shells. This ooze completely covered their developing eyes and mouths as well, yet it was permeable enough to allow light, food, and air through. To diverse degrees, these zoea had their four appendages already, the developing arms allowing them to crawl over the rocks, their early legs propelling them through the water, while they were still without hooves. Orfar knew that this was mere coincidence, but the ooze's translucency was pleasantly reminiscent of the Disciple State's pale armour, unlike the disagreeable carmine of the Predator State. The Asdormoy overseeing the zoea was stood atop the raised platform across the room, and on seeing its superior called out, "Orfar, you honour us with your presence." "Oh, Foldori, I am simply free from duties for a while," Orfar diffused a sense of strict formality, making its way down the stone pathway towards its comrade, taking care not to step on the youngling that was hopping up the rocks rather boisterously. "How are you faring?" "I cannot complain, albeit it is hardly an arduous task. A necessary one nonetheless. What of the parents?" "I have not seen them since they left for their posts," Foldori admitted, stepping aside so as to give Orfar space. "I assume they are just as well as the rest of us. They are each doing their bit for the cause after all." Nodding, the pair each tapped their fingers in reference, on a single hand the thumb meeting fourth, fourth meeting index, index meeting little, little meeting middle, and middle meeting thumb. Able to stand side by side now, they looked back over the artificial habitat. The youngling Orfar had avoided stepping on had managed to crawl down one of the branching paths, boldly going forth on its expedition to the nursery wall. At this moment it was passing a pool in which three more of the zoea appeared to be tussling. Foldori sighed. It is a pity that they will not remember being here. But they will know the rewards of what we do today. They will live free from the threat of a war like the one our people have sadly been a part of. Almost as though it was cheering, a youngling let out a gargling cry near their feet. "Are any of them named thus far?" Orfar spoke again, this time on a much more positive note. Foldori could have chuckled. "You can see none of them are anywhere near duality. It will be some time." They were suddenly distracted by a series of splashes to their left. One of the zoea had managed to loosen the stones of a poolside mound with its climbing, sending the outermost layer of rocks tumbling down its side into the water. The youngling responsible had gone down with them. The two adults were off in an instant, hopping over with springs of their powerful legs. Gentle hands scooped the stones out of the water, having put them to one side with further zoea having already scrambled into the space, said stones. Having to put them to one side with further zoea having already scrambled into the space, said stones had left behind in falling away. Pretty soon they were having to alternate between this and shooing even more zoea away, their basic curiosity drawing them to the disturbance. With the removal of the last stones came the reveal of the culprit. Other than us being slightly dazed, it was perfectly fine. Not that this had been a huge disruption, but the room went back to its usual mundanity in its wake all the same, for what that was worth. Foldori was not done having an actual conversation with someone, however, contrary to the routine that was settling in. "If I may ask," the Asnomoi turned to its superior. What is the actual reason for you being here? While I obviously have reason to be, your place is surely somewhere more important. Of course. As you suspect, I do have more of a motive for being here than merely to see our dear Zoea. We are almost ready for palingenesis, so I thought you should know that when we get to that point, the idol will be further securing its hold and position. We would not want to risk corrupting the algorithm beyond our own modification, would we? We do not want the access point inadvertently shifting. This, however, will result in an amount of ship-wide vibrations, which I assume will cause some distress for this lot. I just wanted to brace you. You did not have to come in person to tell me that. Onfar shrugged. As I said, for now I have a bit of time to spare. Plus, I figured I could go from arranging one miracle to seeing another. Both of them swept their gazes over the assortment of younglings once more. I had presumed it might have had something to do with the Palantheas, Voldori remarked. I had someone coming in here before you to warn me about them. Onfar shook its head with such a display of dismissal. You have no need to worry about them. They may have heart, but I am sure they do not have the wherewithal to pose any sort of threat. Besides, we are here for a noble cause. The universe will know this and guide us to our victory. So a bit of a purely alien discourse there. Whilst also giving you a bit more information about them as a species and insight into... Because whenever you come across, in science fiction, a species of any given kind, usually you're looking at some kind of homogeny within them. But if you see different members of a given race in different contexts, they are going to be different. And not only does that mean within their class and position and what they're doing, their attitudes, that also means age as well. So we have here our further introduction of the younglings there, the Zoea, which is not a word I made up. That is an actual term. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I assume I am. But it's the term for the young of a crustacean, I believe. Since they are shelled, I felt that worked. Cool. Oh, that's a bit of a dark segue, considering we were just talking about the younglings. This is not Star Wars Episode 3, but despite the fact that we literally have death on the cover, the Grim Reaper, the matter of death more as a concept, more thematically, is, again, something that has had to be dealt with in the writing of these books. In general, the tone of these has been getting darker. Yeah, if you were to go straight from book 1 to book 4, there would probably be a definite tonal shift. It's more, it progresses as the books go along. But within that, there is, without getting into specifics in any way, more of a body count in this book than there is in book 1, comparatively. And in some cases, there's thematic reason for this. There is, in some cases it's thematic. In other cases, it's what happens is for the purposes of the story, for the... I don't want to say for the shock factor, because it's not for that entirely. It's how the story is designed to go to set up other things. But things are happening. On that front, I do remember in one instance in particular, one of my beta readers a few years ago commented that, not necessarily that it shouldn't happen at all, but the context surrounding the death should be different. But I've kept it as it is because, as I say, I think thematically it works as it is, not specifying, but just giving general commentary. Otherwise, there is a matter of consequence. And consequence, not just in terms of death, but in the action in general, is something that, once more, is something I've talked about previously in terms of when going through these manuscripts for the final times, now this / last year as compared to a few years ago when they were last looked at. Yeah, I have a better sense of there is, for instance, either going to be emotional consequences to certain things or physical consequence, lasting physical damage, unless you're a Manson and can heal yourself, unless in turn the Manson has been subject to a slightly different thing. So I've been adding in some more of those details in terms of lingering effects on people. But then in more the case I'm thinking here, there's something which happens in book 3, that, no spoilers, that I realised when doing that in this one. Yeah, there should probably be some consequence for this. There's no room for consequence in book 3. It really can only happen in book 4. And even then, I have added in, like, I don't know if it amounted to a page of something happening, or part of that at least, some back and forth acknowledging what happened. And same again later on, but I don't know in that case. Media or like action stories and adventures can have a way of trivializing, just dispatching with nameless goons. This person isn't a goon that I'm thinking of, but if I'm thinking more action, it's like the henchman can just be shot down and mown past because you want them to get to Big Bad, right? But those henchmen still are people themselves and so forth. I don't. Well, depends on the situation, but it would feel wrong to leave it with this one happenstance feeling like it didn't matter. As it kind of didn't in the original versions of the draft, it just happens and is left and never brought up again. I still maybe if. Well, I think I don't know. The story doesn't really allow for it. I fit in an acknowledgement of it, but there's no real payoff. So sorry, that one person. But oh well, things happen. We can, as a writer, growing older, also having more experience with writing, reading, getting the degree, and also just generally interacting with people online. Well, I say interacting. I don't do much of the interacting myself, but being aware of other friends and so forth talking online, and getting a better impression of just different ways of looking at things, certainly has meant that probably going forwards, I don't expect to have a situation like that again soon, but I don't really know what I'm wording at this point, but I'll be more conscious of the ramifications of certain moments, which otherwise might, because they're not part of the main action, just be brushed over, moved on from. But to the people for whom are experiencing it, who aren't the main characters, it will mean something. I should move on instead of rambling. Yeah. But with that, we have next one, which is about Grail death. So two of your brothers and lords, Grail, as I say, is the guy on the front cover. You also have Stark, who is kind of the punching bag of the other brother and lords, although he does try to stand up for himself. The heavy pattering of feet signalled Stark's arrival at the entrance to Grail's temporary throne room in this turret. Not looking up at the lesser lord's crossing of his threshold, the skeletal figure was leaning forward in his chair, fingers tapping on its sculpted arm, impatiently awaiting the moment when they could move on with things. This might have led some to believe that Grail would be uplifted by what his brother had to offer him. However, his general bitterness prevented that outcome. Stark paused to see if he would be able to meet those yellow eyes. He could not. "I have the reconnaissance results for you," Stark prompted, indicating the tablet in his hand. Grail took the tablet and made a show of flicking through the data gathered. On the one hand, he knew he needed to keep up pretenses. On the other, this was purely a waste of time in his opinion. He already had the schematics of the Asnamoy ship committed to memory thanks to the plans Mirdi had stolen. Despite his mistress having gone to all the effort of stealing them, He couldn't put them to use himself so as to keep his connection to our operation secret. With this in mind, he couldn't go ahead and immediately use the forces at his disposal to deal with the Asnomoi nuisance. He wouldn't be able to explain where he'd got the necessary information from to so swiftly pull it off in such a way that the machine would be left in prime condition while its crew alone would be destroyed. No, he had to wait for them to find enough information themselves for them to use as a starting point, wherein he could slip in everything else they needed to know. At least he'd been able to convince them to do this in the Outer Realm time stream, rather than displaced in a hexagon field, as would have been actually more efficient. It had required some skillful wordplay, something that had been worth it to have these events match Mirdi's preferred arrangement of things. There was a couple of bits of terminology in there, hopefully it flowed along. Stark had already begun speaking again. I was thinking, with the combined power of the turrets and our Earth-based weapons, we could easily take out the landing supports, causing the structure to fall and destroy itself on its own impact. I'd wager that would be a safer course than an assault on the whole structure, lest they have something hidden up their sleeve. No! Growl snapped in outrage, his neck twisting so violently that it would have risked whiplash in a human. That is not how we're doing this. But, a taken aback Stark whimpered, we cannot leave them be. Well, we must retaliate. Not to question your wisdom, of course. How else would you... If you were about to suggest that any method we take must be with the eventual goal of destroying it, you were thinking with too closed a mind. What we have on our doorstep is a masterpiece of technology, one which would make a fine addition to our collection. While we obviously wouldn't use it for its current person in the endgame, weapons can be adapted. I suppose, Stark was struggling to rationalise. All the same, any non-destructive method leaves the risk of the Asnomois getting to use it first. We can always reverse engineer the technology later. What argument could Graal use to convince this imbecile, which didn't involve revealing the truth that Mirdi wanted the idol for her own use in the name of their ultimate master? A delay in hence formulating a verbal response prompted the skeleton to make up for said failure in another way, this manifesting with a hand lashing out to grip Stark's shoulder, sharp white tips tearing through the fabric of his robes and into the warmth beneath. Not even from the cloak, but from deep within his harrowing form, flowed channels of darkness that injected themselves into his brother's flesh, bringing with them sudden agony that would haphazardly disseminate through his being. The man's frame either stiffened or slackened. That particular consequence wasn't the clearest over the dominant tactile sensation inside his bones. Meanwhile, his cells were being overcome by debilitating shadows, sapping their wills to function. Concentrated on summoning another pulse to drive home, the surge Graal felt would only have been a fraction of the essence corrosion he... Why can't I speak? Concentrating on summoning another pulse to drive home, the surge Graal felt would only have been a fraction of the essence corrosion he was inflicting. If he wouldn't be convinced, he'd be subdued, simply made to go along with his better's designs, at least for now. Obedience learnt to relieve further frustration. As for Stark himself, through the blitz of full-body decompositional illusions, a single thought held strong. An instinct from experience kicked into action. Do not make a sound. The Supreme Lord ground his teeth, letting go while not moving his bony digits far at first, satisfied that had been enough of an exertion on his part to do the job. That would be a waste of time and effort. We don't want to expend the human military when they may still be required for their pre-planned purposes, and our workforce already has to build the rest of the artillery. Besides, we know that the Asnomois do not have the capability of coming out on top with us in the picture. While I'm not advocating leaving them alone, we don't have to worry too much about them succeeding. Had the above not just transpired, Stark might have pointed out that using the military in this way could produce a similar outcome to what they were currently going to do. As it was, the Lord was unfortunately familiar with this brand of penetrating torment. Although, with it having been so long and with them now so close to their conclusion, he'd hoped he'd never have to experience it again. He knew the extensive bruising of his skin and the charring of his throat that made his words sound like barks would fade. He'd braced enough for the harrowing chills in the preceding infinitesimal moment, and was relieved that it was already over. Nevertheless, he decided in lieu of that possibility to give a much more submissive admission, focusing rather on trying to keep his breathing measured, his composure suitably standard, all things considered. I only wanted to be sure. I know, Grile assured him, suddenly speaking in a much softer voice. That is why you should do as I say. Grile could see in Stark's lined face that they'd definitely passed the moment where he'd fully succumbed to his way of thinking. He'd have been very surprised if that hadn't done it, even if the assault hadn't actually been planned. The first thing we're going to do is send out the Ravans, Grile instructed, placing the tablet back into the greasy hand from whence it had come. How we proceed from there will need a little more explaining, but that is to be our start. Go, inform the Bracknell captains of their assignment. Grile directed Stark to the doorway, yet he had no need to go that far. As such, it was awkwardly that he sidled up to the wall instead, hobbling to insert the tablet into a connective slot, linking it to the main computer systems. In a few clicks, he had opened a channel to the nearest captain of the turret housing Ravans. The message relayed, what they then heard in kind was not what they expected. That's what they're doing, the Bracknar updated them. The Ravans are being amassed as we speak. The order's already been given. The two Brethren-Lords shared a suspicious look. Neither replied to the news for as long as it took for the surprise to fully register. When it did, Grile glared at the tablet as though it personally had mortally offended him. By who? Cool. All right. There we go. Cool. Just one extra. So we've got. Cool. We're actually slightly ahead of schedule. I can afford to ramble. Again, or if you have any other questions or things you want to ask, can't talk to me either through. No, that's not a thing. Or you want to contact me either way, you can. So, speaking of getting in contact, I was wondering, again, maybe something for more of an audience because we don't have too many people watching right now, but would it be a thing potentially that people were interested in, whereby I would offer some sort of competition where if you got the first book, so the cheapest one, Gift of the Manson, and read that, and then say up until the 31st of July, if you were to email in to my author email, philipquint2158@outlook.com, it's the back of all the books and on social medias and stuff. Email in with like a given subject line and so what was your favourite part of the book? Or favourite section of the book? Then from those who submitted, we would send in, a random person we picked, and I would send off to them the other 3 books in the series, or / if they already have some of the books, whichever ones they don't have, I would send them that for free. So like a way of getting the whole set just by buying the first one. The reason that I've gone with, like, say, favourite section, I worry that that's narcissistic. So tell me what you love about the book. But, I need some sort of proof. I want some sort of proof of purchase. And if I was just to say, who's your favourite character? There's plenty of stuff that I've put online where you could just look up who a character is and say that without having bought it. Although, why would you want the other 3 books without having got the first one? I don't know. But that's my rationale there. And the reason why I'm saying email submission is, I think that'd be easier to correlate together, and also technically I have a newsletter that I run through my website, although I'll be the first to admit it's not a brilliant newsletter, and the next one in June is meant to be the last one for hiatus, but it would get the competition out to those who have the newsletter as well. I would have said leave a review for Gift of the Mountain itself on Amazon, because again, really, reviews are really helpful. If you can leave one, or leave an honest one. But then I don't know, like, once I picked someone, how could I guarantee that I would get back to them? I don't think you can get someone's contact details just from looking at their profile of how they left a review, unless they're a specific review and they have contact details. But I don't know. Also, people are more likely to have email than, say, or definitely having Twitter or Instagram or something like that. Facebook. Actually, no, I wouldn't want to do it Facebook. But is that a thing people want? Well, you are yourselves, or just as a concept, do you think that would be? And, like, obviously, if you read the first book and you didn't want to read, everyone has their own taste in reading, don't want to read the rest, that's fine. But, you know, if you didn't want the rest, or you already had the rest, you're already someone who's bought all 4 books, in which case, thank you, then there'd be no need to enter the competition, or, you mean, you still could. You could tell me what you liked about it, but also acknowledge don't include me. But I don't know what to say. This is a concept that I came up with yesterday. Be putting out there advertising for to get people reading the first book, because obviously I'm gonna. It's a thing of promotion. Like, how am I supposed to promote like book 4 when people won't have necessarily read book 1 yet? So it's more having to promote the entire series. So get people reading the beginning, and if they enjoy that, set one person up to get the rest. And even if everyone else doesn't win, they hopefully, because they've shown interest by getting in with the competition, that they would want to then go out of their way and read the next ones anyway. Because they'll be getting it through Amazon, like, there are only certain countries, so far as I can tell, that you can buy the books. And granted, it's a long list of countries, but it's not exhaustive. But presumably, like, if someone's going to be into the competition, they're going to be in one of those countries anyway. But and with that, because you can, like, order things. So, like, say someone in America, because I know I've got a couple of American readers as well. If someone in America did it and they won, if I was to go through Amazon.com rather than .co.uk, so that it would actually print from a US site, and then could I send it as a gift? Because gifting gets it sent to another address, and that would mean that they would need to be okay with me knowing their address. That would have to be in the thing as well. But send it to their address and send it like that. Hopefully that'll be fine, because I could get around that and then not need to also pay for international shipping. Because again, it'd be printing in the US one or whatever country it is. But yeah, otherwise, if that wouldn't work, I would have to limit it to the UK. And I'll be honest, at this stage, I imagine most of my readers, for what there are of them, are going to be British, because they're either going to be my friends or friends of friends / friends of family. It's been spread by word of mouth, probably. I do have a couple of people I know, as in, I'm aware that there are a couple of people who follow the series who I have no idea who they are, because like they follow on the Instagram account, and yeah, no, I've no idea who this person is. For the most part, anyway. God, that's it. Yes. Yeah. No one drank. That's the thing. I don't talk often. When recording the YouTube videos each week, unless I can get some in advance, which I haven't recently, but doing the YouTube videos each week is the most that I talk in that week usually. So me talking here for a couple of hours. Yeah, it's unusual. And that's not just. Oh, hold on. We need to plug that in so that the computer that the stream is running through doesn't run out of battery. How are you doing for battery? You're doing fine. You're doing fine. Cool. Everything else is doing fine on battery. Great. Yeah, that would have been bad. But oh, was that a jump thing? Hopefully that's fine. I've completely lost what my train of thought was. Oh yeah, talking. Yeah, not even just because, you know, staying at home in the current climate. But yeah, just They're a lot more thinking than talking, which, as a lot of things I've said before, but which is why I struggle with social media, because I'm aware for some people talking online, or whether it's social media or it's like texting or Discord, whatever it is, that maybe find it easier than talking to someone in person. For me, it's the same level of difficulty. When it's more, it's not, well, I do sometimes get in situations where I can't talk for a moment, but it's just I have nothing to say to the world. Because I don't know, my internal observations, it just doesn't occur to me to voice them. So why should I? I have nothing to tweet. I have nothing to share. Instagram is easier because I have a rota of things that aren't necessarily about myself, but they're more tangential topics. But anyway, that's sure. Why not? Okay, let's at this juncture get on to the final extract. So we are about 10 minutes ahead of schedule, but how did that even happen? Well, I suppose I started on the first topic 5 minutes early. Maybe one section was short. Oh, whatever. Right, so I've chosen this section. This wasn't, as I said, really meant to be the last one I was going to read. There was another one later, but it would have been too much of a hassle to try to censor important information. This one, I think, keeps things at least a little bit obscure. And it's following original characters for this book. As I said, we've got different points of view characters. This here is a group of soldiers, kind of a mismatch that have ended up together from different militaries from around Europe, who have currently managed to sneak into an alien structure that they're now investigating, presumably with the intent of trying to take it down because it's presumably dangerous. Though none of them would verbally admit it, Zeno's team of soldiers were glad to end their climb when Egremont brought them to their first potential way out of the shaft. It was a very obvious exit, namely a reasonably sized hole in the wall. He didn't really have to wait for Gigino's permission to proceed. The first reaction of every member of the team upon entering the next room was to how shiny it was. Compared to the minerals everything else inside had apparently been made of so far, this room was comprised almost entirely of some sort of metal that, even without an obvious light source, managed to glitter. As for the shape of the room, there was only one curving wall, all sloping downwards towards a point, the inverted apex of which was obscured by a cloud of some unknown composition. The latter, thankfully, wasn't dispersing through the chamber, for who knew what effect it would have on them as humans. Either way, they'd been feeling somewhat strange on breathing the air inside the structure, but at least it had nevertheless remained manageable thus far. This wall, which they were now passing through up where it met the ceiling, was lined with steps to aid in the navigation of it, while from the centre of the ceiling descended a glowing pipeline that quickly split into multiple smaller versions of itself, which arced around the space to finally come back together at the apex, all but meeting in the midst of the cloud. At a couple of points along their lengths, there were access panels actually connecting them to the wall. You said to get out as soon as possible, Gigino remarked to Zeno. I'd say this is pretty much that. This has to be what we could see through the structure, between the structure's legs. That should be a safe bet, Zeno agreed, although his attention was focused more on something a bit more specific. He'd spotted what might have been a piece of plating that was meant to cover the hole they'd come through. Maybe it had been a mistake of an engineer, these aliens must have had them as well, to leave it lying to one side instead of replacing it on departing from the room. With the whole team inside, Zeno absent-mindedly placed the metal sheet over the gap. As soon as the two plates touched, they fused together, making the whole thing airtight. Those who'd noticed stared at him, unsure of how to react. Thinking on his feet, Zeno thankfully spotted something else. There's an actual door up there. We can use that if needs be. I think we'll have to deal with things as they come, Gigino forgave him, trying to keep the group moving. Let's see if we can work out what this place is. One by one, the soldiers began making their ways down and around the steps. So smooth was every surface that grip wasn't the easiest to maintain, but each managed it while they were being steady about their movements. They had their firearms ready in their hands for any sudden necessity, yet all there was besides themselves and the metalwork were the sounds of their footsteps. As they got further down towards the apex, the closer they could get to the mysterious pipes, which at the same time caused them to notice the slight heat accompanying them. These things don't look too strong, Egremont observed, indicating the outer casings of the pipes through which the glow of their contents was seeping. A few good shots should do the trick. We don't know what that would do, Zeno warned. Giorgino agreed. We shouldn't do anything until we have a better understanding of the environment. I get that, but we have to start being proactive sooner or later. Despite his retort, however, Egremont didn't seem to be thirsty for debate beyond that very statement. As he drifted apart from the rest, making his own route, Giorgino and Zeno carried on the train of thought on their own. Meanwhile, the other members of the team in turn began a completely separate conversation behind them. Maybe we should try to disable this, though, Giorgino was reconsidering. It'd still be risky. We're in a spaceship. What do you think this might be? Zeno might not have had extensive knowledge of alien technologies, for why should he have? But by process of elimination of what might be in a structure like this, he wasn't left with many options, and of those he felt he knew what answer she was looking for. A weapon. Exactly. And if it is a weapon, it's likely to be their main one based on where it is. In that case, yet her suggestion was rudely cut short by a few straight seconds of sizzling hisses. Following the noise, the team gazed upwards to see the door Zeno had pointed out, separating from the ceiling, to which it had been melded until it was able to swing away. By the time it opened, the humans had already dived for cover. From where they crouched behind their respective stretches of pipeline, none of them could get a proper look at what had just joined them in the room, although they did recognize the sound of the door in the ceiling sealing shut again. Then the footsteps started, the reverberations from every contact made with their metal footings clanging through the space. The soldiers tried to get a glimpse of what they were from beneath the pipes, now that these newcomers might be moving into view, but because of how they had to anchor themselves in place so as to not slip, this didn't get them very far. All right, Giorgino whispered to those near enough to hear. We have to split up. There's no use in risking us being all found at once. Hopefully we can surround them. However, at the very least, we can remain hidden. I'm going to see if I can get a look at them. No, wait! Zeno's words of caution would not be listened to. Giorgino crawled her way back up the sloping wall with the use of the pipe to reach the bend in it where her view might be less impaired. Her gun was still drawn. Nothing happened for one tense moment. The next second, something had lifted her off her feet, dragging her out of the line of sight of the others. With that is, unless I spontaneously pick out another one, which, considering how long it took me to pick out these sections, is not going to happen. That is your last teaser for the book 4, the last book in the series, Tower of the Storm. Of course, if you haven't seen it already, on my website, Dominic Hodgson, DominicHodgson.com/Tower of the Storm sample extracts with dashes, or on the homepage if you scroll down to where I have stuff about book 4. Well, I need to add a button for where you can get it in the shop and add it to the shop, and I need to add more pages, load more pages to the shop, to the website. Either way, there's an existing button there where you can find the page. There's 4 sample extracts there. That's the prologue, and then 3 others from throughout the book. The latter 2 of those shorter than the others. So add pages to website. I'll do that later. So there's some sample extracts there. But other than that, if you want to get to this, you will just have to get the book itself for yourself after presumably getting the others, whether it's paperback or ebook, whichever format suits you better. Yeah, it's over, basically. Again, because I am considering this franchise as a whole, because I've got lots more ahead, and because not all, but some characters we will meet again. It's not like a definitive departure from these, but nevertheless, on the other hand, because whereas with new stories, I have to write new stuff, as opposed to these, where for years I've been going back over and over the manuscripts occasionally to spruce them up. That in theory I should not need to go back over these. They should be done now. I won't have to look at these stories anymore. Will I read them again at some point in the future? I don't know. I'll probably be too afraid to suddenly find more mistakes, which there shouldn't be at this point. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. That's the end of my drink as well. Guys, a little set here. The books, obviously, the actual proper collection will be done when the actual copy arrives. It doesn't have the watermark on it, but we have a story of progression. Even from here, you can hopefully just see that things are moving along. And because there's a delay on this, I can't see how they look on the camera until I look. So hopefully that was all been fine. We can see we've got a little bit of a progression going on there. Yeah, they're in frame. I can see that now. Here's how I stand on these at this point. The first book, obviously, Gift of the Mansin, is going to hold a dear place in my heart, to use that sort of language, because it was the first one. I definitely think it gets better from there, and indeed I've improved it in these latest edits and so forth, but nonetheless, it's fun. It's a fun jaunt. Book 3 has my favourite sections in it. I won't say what they are, but there are a couple of passages in there which are my favourite throughout the whole set. I imagine will remain my favourite for quite a while. One of them was a section that I was looking forward to writing since the beginning. Like, as soon as it was like, I know that's what's going to happen. Because eventually once we get, we're working through the first couple of books, book 3, this is now the book where that happens. And because I was starting to write out of order at that point, I think I still nevertheless had written most of book 3 by that point, but I skipped ahead a little and wrote it. And the other one was actually the last section. I'll say this one. It's because I am 99% certain that this was the last extract that I read out during the live stream for book 3, where it's a fight between two of the main characters after they've had a disagreement. That was, as I've changed things slightly and edited, but in terms of the first draft, that fight was the last thing that I wrote. Yes. So I wasn't really thinking much of it beforehand. It was just, this is just something that happens. But once I got to it, it was fun to suddenly get creative with it. I could, you don't necessarily think that when you're writing, you're choreographing, but in the action sequences, there is very much, you have to come up with a choreography for it that you can get away with describing. As for book 4, that is, my favourite overall book. Because of just what it is, in terms of the launch and what we're able to achieve with it, in terms of all the threads interweaving and so forth, and the fact that it is the culmination, everything that's going on there, and again, from beta readers who are the only ones who have read them all, I'm told that is the best one, because that was also the one I wrote during university, so compared to the other ones, that was what I had, in terms of first drafts, I had a better writing ability at that stage. And that just leaves book 2. And I like all of them. I wouldn't release them if I didn't like them. But it's just kind of the unfortunate fact that book 2, Arc of Angels, doesn't have any specific standout detail to it in that sort of way. Obviously, it's important in terms of building out the lore. Because if book 1 is introducing you to the universe, book 2 is widening it out. It's now, we've established where we are. Now you can meet these people and these people. Now you can get these concepts. But yeah, just from my standpoint as the writer, it serves its purpose. That's it. But yeah, come on, show this one some love. And with this one, don't get in the corner. This is the one I'm actually the most apprehensive about in terms of reviews, because all the reviews I've got at this point have been for Gift of the Manson. No one has thus far left a review for this or beyond. So, because it is getting bigger, because it is getting slightly more complicated, like, what I don't want to happen is for people who did like book one suddenly get to book two and be like, this is now getting a bit much or a bit weird, or I couldn't follow it as well. Hopefully that won't happen, but still, because I haven't got any feedback other than beta readers from years ago on book two, I don't know what the reaction is going to be. Still, most look forward to hearing people's reactions to book three in the secret section that I haven't explained. I want to know what people think about that. And that's why one of my friends who said they would read them all, binge read them. I want if they choose to, they don't have to, but they have gone along with the suggestion of live commentary. Well, not live commentary, but commentary as they go through. I want to know all the reactions there. And then book four, I have them again thematically. There may be a couple of not because book four is the darkest. You've got a couple of bits in book three that maybe you could give a run for its money. I said that exactly in the overview video, but because book four is the darkest, there's a little bit of, there's some fantasy violence and some threat in book one, but that's still, it's mostly this is interesting, let's go on this adventure, see what happens. Hopefully it's not descended too much into the darkness by book four that people are turned off it. Hopefully they can still enjoy the story as it is, and it should be fine anyway. It's not like it needs an 18+ rating or anything, but we'll see. As I said, there's do I have it still? There was something I saw on Twitter the other day. Pretty sure I took a screenshot of it. Nope. It was about how... No, I don't think I've got it. It was about how helpful I liked it. I liked it, retweeted it. I wasn't saying anyway. I forget the specific number, but I think it was maybe like there's a certain threshold of reviews at which point Amazon will start like including it in other things. Maybe it was 15. There was definitely a 5 in it, and it was double digits. Of a certain number of reviews, regardless of what those reviews are, although presumably the algorithm will work it better if they're better reviews, but like in whatever Amazon does to suggest, oh, you may like this thing, or buyers of this also bought this, only after it's crossed that threshold will it start promoting it in that way. So I'm hoping it eventually, again, only do it when it's honest. Once you have read it, and whatever your actual opinion is, please consider leaving that. But hopefully we can get to the point where we have enough reviews on book one where we can then get to that stage, and then once we've got for one, because again, I don't know if people who have done reviews thus far are necessarily aware that the sequels came out in the succession that they did, or rather that they were already out by the time they've reviewed book one. Because the reviews are always like, I can't wait for book two, or whatever it is. It's like, well, if you look it up, it's already there. Because it's probably unusual that if you look at the release date of book one, they say, yeah, we'll probably wait around, I don't know, a year or something for, I don't know what the gap is between books, usually. Depends on the author, I suppose. But yeah, they're already out there. So if you have enjoyed it, be sure to go on, read book two, read book three, read book four, if you want to. Or, you know what, if you just want to support me, regardless of your opinion of the books, you can do that as well. You don't even have to read them, you can just buy them. Well, you know what, obviously I'd like you to do this because I'd like you to enjoy the story, but genuinely. The main thing there actually probably is sharing, talking about it. Just, I'm not asking you to become a walking billboard or anything like that. And again, it's purely as a favor. But you know, if you know someone who likes science fiction or mythology or adventures and books reading, you know, just check this one out. You might enjoy it. Give it a go. Alright. Alright. With that, because it's as I say, I have gone over before previously, although I think that was more due to technical issues, which we haven't had this time. I mean, I could still jinx it in the last 10 minutes, but this has actually seemed to have gone well. Can you hear me? Yes, you can still hear me. If anyone's curious why I put it to this ear, for whatever reason, in the last couple of months, whatever it is, the left headphone just stopped working. I've no idea why. Noise only comes out of the right one. I suppose I could still hold the right one to my left ear, but anyway. I forgot what I was. Oh yeah, yeah, we've got to this. Because I usually say just do it for 2 hours. That's what I prepare for. 12 till 2. Yeah, let's start wrapping up here. So what next, right? Now that this is done, obviously I'm going to continue promoting the books. I'll need to keep on doing that, which in itself is an exhausting prospect. I don't do social media. And I think also a part of it is that because I don't often get new followers, I feel like if I just keep, or likes or whatever it is, if I just keep promoting the same stuff over and over again, that's surely tiring or boring to those existing followers who just keep seeing it. So I keep trying to find ways to mix it up. But nevertheless, forgive me if you do follow me and you keep seeing me doing this. I need to find ways of doing it. But yeah, with that, I'll continue doing that. Obviously, I've done the whole video of what comes next in terms of what the next book is going to be, what stage I am with that, because I've not changed my position since I've made that video. I don't know what, because that, I don't know, I was just struggling with getting into the flow of that one. The sections I was writing were all over the place and fragmented, and even though I have a plan of what happens in it, I need to get back to that. Basically, it doesn't exist at the moment. It has a few sections in chapter 1 and 2 and whatever. I need to work on that. Don't know how long it's going to take and go through drafts and whatever. Meanwhile, yeah, I mentioned before that I don't have an income. Now I need to work towards that. I've been advised by someone in the industry of how I could potentially go about trying to join initiatives for getting into screenwriting for TV. We can try to have a go at those. Meanwhile, but basically overall, my next stuff, the aspirational side of things, has to do with TV writing or production, going towards being able to write stuff there, because it's always ultimately, as I will have mentioned before, and so I've broken record, because I want to work on Doctor Who someday. So there's other job openings that I've noticed on Indeed and stuff where I could potentially apply for. That's not writing sense, but it's still I could potentially do within the industry. Beyond that, though, because that's not still going to be media, so I'll need to look for stuff just in the general local area, like part-time jobs or whatever it is. Meanwhile, I will continue to write other stuff just on my own. If you are aware of / remember that thing I was talking about where I did a massive document talking through approximately 30 game ideas for Mario, or the Mario franchise, I, the other month, added an extra 11,000 words, something like that, to the end of it as an appendix, which is rather about the Zelda timeline and ideas for Zelda games, which I realised yesterday I need to make an amendment to, because there's currently a hole in one of my bits of logic, so I need to change that. I've got other script stuff of my own that I'm just practicing writing. I'll be doing that. I finally can get back to playing video games, which still will take the lowest priority because there's other stuff to do, but I'm in the middle of a game right now that I haven't now played in 2 months because I've just been focusing on book editing, book preparations. Now this is done this evening, I'm definitely going to get back to that, finally. But yeah, and then of course the YouTube channel is going to continue as always. Weekly. Yeah. I've still got, well, it's either through to mid 2022 or I think actually mid 2023. I have video ideas scheduled or lined up of what I'm going to do. Obviously, that may change per circumstances, but that's the idea. Yeah, but with that, I feel like I was like, why did I pick up this cup? There's no drink left in it. Something at the bottom. Anyway, hopefully you have found this interesting, just as a stream. Thank you for you guys who have kept along with it. I can't tell if it's the same few of you who have stayed without and just one of you lost connection at some point, or if different people have come on and off. But either way, thank you. If you're interested, the book is on, and the book is now in, should be in the description below. If it's not, you may want to refresh. I added the book link just before I went live, so depending if you're waiting beforehand, it's on all the other platforms as well, your Facebook, Twitter. Not on Instagram, but oh yeah, I need to do an Instagram post after this. Yeah. I keep, because that's the thing with ad-libbing. I may have done improv, but that's usually telling a story or something like that, or playing a character. When it's just rambling like this, I had no intention behind that sentence. I don't know where it went from. Yeah, basically 4 minutes of wrapping up at this point. Hopefully, yeah, hope you enjoyed. Hope you, as I said at the beginning, are having a good, whatever your circumstances are at the moment, and whatever you have coming up the weekend, next week, next month. It's all okay. I hope you've been okay prior to this, with everything that's going on in the world and everything that's changing. You know what, I think because I literally have nothing else to say for 3 minutes, rather than just repeating the same farewells over and over again, I'm going to have to leave the screen because, again, I said my laptop was running a stream is over there, so I'm going to have to run over and stop it. But no, there is no way I can leave this up. So, thank you. Here you go. Be sure to get them if you're interested, and very well. Have a good rest of your day.